y'all, and welcome back. My name is Jane Corley with PicVisions, Media Arts and Photography. If it's your first time here, welcome. Make sure to like this video if you learned something new, subscribe to my channel, and ring the bell so you can be notified every time a new video is uploaded every week. In today's episode, we're going to finish our restoration from last week. Today's episode, we're going to learn about the blur, sharpen, dodge, burn, the Gaussian blur filter, as well as some blending options you can use, and some final touches to make this photo look more realistic and put a little life back in this restoration. Let's get started. We want to blur the background of this photo. So we're going to make sure we're on that layer 2 that we created with Control or Command, Alt or Option, Shift E for everything, and that will create that other layer. So we're going to do a quick select with W hotkey for wand to select just the background. You select on it to get the plus sign inside of the circle. You hold the Alt key and you'll get the minus sign inside the circle to deselect. And you're going to just select the background. Go up to Filter, down to Blur, then Gaussian Blur. This will pop up another Properties window. You can scroll around with a little hand to find a good place with a nice size amount of content where you can tell difference from another. Click on your preview box so you've got a live preview, and move the radius slider to the left and to the right to get the blur amount that you're wanting to smooth that background texture out. Having that quick selection on will just show you that difference within the area of the quick selection. Find a good radius. We'll leave it around 5.5, and that will make the change to just where you have quick selected. You can change the opacity of that layer, as we have with many layers underneath it, to get the exact edge that you would like on that background. We'll click off to deselect the marquee and go to the burn tool. The term burn for your photograph is what brings out the shadows on your image. If you choose to use the burn tool, that's exposing more light to the image, creating harder lines, physically burning more light. Another way to do this is the Levels tab, where you can go and do your masking and go through the process of inverting your mask and using certain level adjustments at certain portions like we have before. But if you just have a few adjustments, you can use the burn and the dodge tool within reason. If you go too far, you will pixelate and blow out the pixels in the image. So using the dodge and burn tool for smaller adjustments, lighter dodge and burn adjustments, especially when you adjust the opacity, will create a more controlled adjustment. So we'll use the burn tool to create a little bit more depth in his face, shadow areas, especially in the pocket of the eyes. Be conscious of where the light is coming from in this photo to create natural shadows. The burn tool will create your natural shadows. Control Z will step you back, Control Shift Z will step you forward, as we learned in previous tutorials, if you go a little too far or if you need to see if one option will work better than another. The burn tool at a lower opacity will give you a more manageable adjustment. The creases in the ears with deteriorated photos will bump up the contrast in the photo. Around the neck area as well, we'll get some of those wrinkles that show the authentic movement of the neck. Lightly bring out some shadows in the collar area as well as in the tie to give a more round feel to his neck and clothing. Where there are shadows already on the uniform, you can come down and just bring those shadows out just a little bit more. This defines the fold in his clothing. The burn function comes from when film developers used to use enlargers to develop film, and the longer you exposed the film image to light, the harder the lines were created. Now we'll move on to the dodge tool. The dodge tool is almost the opposite. You're dodging light away from the photo, which will result in brighter highlights. So typically I'll go in and I'll dodge the eyes, I'll dodge the areas on the face and the clothing that are higher so they catch a little bit more light, and create higher highlights in particular areas where I want to bump up the color, desaturate the light, just all the areas that are highlights in the photo. We'll move on to the Sharpen tool. Sharpen, for this instance, is really great for the hair, the eyes, the lips, and any distinguishing features where you might need to bump up the sharpness in a more controlled fashion. Control plus or Command plus will zoom you in. We're still on a lower opacity, so it's not going to make as drastic adjustments. We'll do the same thing we did with the burn tool and come through and sharpen particular areas on the uniform. We're going to create another layer, Control or Command, Alt or Option, Shift E, all at the same time. You're going to do the same steps that you did previously. What our intention with this Gaussian blur is to create a smoothing of his skin. So anywhere where the photo is worn out, pixelated, I want to use this Gaussian blur filter to smooth out his skin tone, giving more of a antique, angelic look. It will also polish the image if you apply the Gaussian blur at a lower opacity. We'll create a mask on top, invert the mask with Control I, make sure you're selected on the mask. You have your brush tool with the white and black, white to reveal and black to conceal, remember? At a lower opacity, we will slowly paint on in a controlled fashion so we don't go too much, don't go too little, to smooth out his skin texture and tone. A little goes a long way with this Gaussian blur on his face. Be careful not to go over the areas you've sharpened and the hair and the eyes, down on the neck, in the ears, as well as any pixelated areas that you wish to smooth out on his uniform to give it a more clean look so it's not distracting those areas that are pixelated. Feel free to lower your opacity or raise your opacity for whatever you need, but I find it's easier to stay 50% or lower when you're applying this sort of blur to smooth out the textures and tones in your image. It's always easier to go over multiple times at a lower opacity than have to keep backing up and backing up because your opacity was too high, or attempting to lower the opacity of the entire layer. We will make a small adjustment to the opacity just until we feel like it's a little more believable. Add a few more adjustments here and there where we might need it, and we'll move on. We're going to select this entire area of just the person. Our intention is to create a blending option on the subject of this photograph. What I want to do is place a drop shadow and outer glow behind him so that he is not in the image. He actually looks like he's sitting on top of the image, giving a little bit more of a three-dimensional effect. So after you've figured out your quick selection, right-click and go to your blending options. Come down to drop shadow, and as you can see, it creates that drop shadow underneath that area, and we don't want that. We'll fix that momentarily. Change the opacity of your blending option because we want to make it look organic. We want to make it look real. So we're going to do distance and spread adjustments, which will create a distance and spread the drop shadow as well as the size. We can do an outer glow, make sure it's on white so it doesn't conflict with the backdrop. Now the next step, we're going to fix this collar. So what we need to do is we need to select this area over here where the collar looks good. Do a Control copy or Command copy and Control or Command V for paste. You're going to edit, transform, and flip horizontally, making a mirror image of that selection you just made. Use your transform and warp adjustments with your Alt, Control, or Command and Option keys on the anchor points to make those warp adjustments. Look back towards my text transformation tool adjustments in a previous video if you have questions about the transform tool. You're going to erase the unwanted portions of that copy at a lower opacity so it's controlled. Erase the unwanted portions. Now you still have this little turn up area. That turn up area will fix here in just a second. Make sure to erase just what you want to keep, and we're going to clone stamp to hide that adjustment. So if you see the plus, we're clone stamping from above to get the seam of that collar laying exactly the way we want. So we've got this collar layer here in layer 6. Do the claw again if it's just easier for you to do the whole entire layer. You're going to copy the upper collar area, and it's going to look rough. We'll smooth it out in just a minute. We want to hide that correction. And take small samples from areas around on that collar area to hide that adjustment. Do not continue to copy over and copy over yourself, or you will tell on yourself as you continue to move around your copy tool, and you're sampling content from another location in the image to recreate image qualities that you may have lost or you would like to replace. Zooming in with Control plus or Control in the wheel on your mouse will help you make smaller minor adjustments. Use your eyedropper tool to sample, then a brush at a lower opacity to paint on some shadow textures that you'll need to recreate. The lower opacity allows you to create a shadow pattern that looks normal. A smaller clone stamp tool will help adjust this tie area, and looks good. That collar is now fixed. His uniform is now squared away. So to finish off this image, we are going to do one last color correction layer just to get the overall look and the flushness in his face. Like we did in our first episode, we're going to a color balance layer. We're going to flush his cheeks and lips, putting a little blood in that face. So your yellows, magentas, and reds, Control I to invert the mask. B for brush, we'll stay about 10% opacity and lightly paint on the flushness in his lips, starting with the shadowed edges and working our way to the middle. You can go a little further with females, but with males, don't make them look like they're wearing lipstick. Just a slight adjustment to get some color in his lips. Now we'll move to the cheeks, and it's almost like you're painting on blush in the shadowy areas, heavier, the highlight areas a little lighter. The change is very minor. Make sure to save your work as you go. Great job, guys. So I hope this video was helpful on some more tools, filters, and basic adjustments that you can put in your Photoshop workflow. If you have any questions or comments on this video, please leave them in the comment section below. Until next time, I'm Jane Corley with PicVisions, Media Arts and Photography. Make sure to like this video if you learned something new, subscribe to my channel, and ring the bell so you can be notified every time a new video is uploaded every week. See you later, guys!